Hi everyone, welcome to section 4 of Access for ECDL. We're going to look at editing in this section. This will be a pretty short chapter compared to the other the table ones because we don't have an awful lot to look at in editing. By the end of this section we're going to be hopefully able to change column widths in our tables, find text within a table, edit and delete data in records, use the undo facility. Now undoing in Access in databases works a little bit differently to the way it works in things like Excel and Word and PowerPoint. There are certain things we can't undo, and we've already seen a couple of examples of those anyway in our tables videos. There are certain things we can undo as well, so we'll look at those. We'll see how to add and delete records. We'll look at using what are known as wildcards to do a search for information within a table. And finally, we look at how to edit and enter data using shortcuts. That's a particularly useful one. So the first thing we'll look at are changing column widths. So without further ado, I'm going to open up the database that we need to look at that example, and we'll get cracking. The first thing we're going to look at are changing column widths. We're going to look at how to change the width of the columns in a database table. And you've seen that we were able to do that in Microsoft Excel and Microsoft Word as well. And it kind of works the same way, to be honest, in Access as well. So first of all, let's open a database so that we can actually practice this. I'm going to go to File, Open, and I can see the database that I want here, Houses. I have it saved as Houses 1. You may have needed to do that, you may not have. But don't worry, if you didn't need to do it, it's exactly the same database that we're working on with the same data in it. So I'm going to left click once in it and my Houses or Houses 1 database has opened. Again, whenever you open a database, all of the objects within the database, and that's what a database is, it's a collection of objects, will always be displayed in the object pane on the left hand side of the screen. None of the objects when you open a database, an existing database, are opened by default, so you have to choose which object you want to open. We have 3 tables in this database, and we have 1 form. Now, we're not going to be looking at the form yet. In fact, that's our second last chapter. But I am going to open up the Houses table. And we do that by left-clicking twice on it, double left-clicking on it. And the Houses table has opened up. So we can see that we have a number of columns here, town, address, type, and so on and so forth. And we have 30 records. I can see down here that I have 1 of 30 records. So I'll show you a couple of different methods for adjusting the column width in a table. The first way is to right-click on a column header. If you right-click on a column header, just as in Excel or in Word, you will select the entire column. So make sure that you're right-clicking on the column header, and we go down to Field Width, and we'll get a dialog box such as this, a column width dialog box, and the current width for this column is in there at 16.5 units. I'm going to change that simply by typing in the number 10. I don't need to delete 16.5 because it's highlighted, so Access is waiting for me to type in another value that I need. So I'm just going to type in 10, no need to type in any unit, or rather unit of measurement, and click OK. And the column has gotten narrower. Now it's gotten too narrow, to be honest. Now I can't see all of the data. Data is still there, I just can't read it all. So the second way of adjusting the column width is to hover your mouse over the dividing line between the town column and the address column, and you'll get a double-headed arrow. This is exactly the same as it was in Word and in Excel. I hover my mouse over that dividing line, I hold my left mouse button down, and I drag the mouse, and you can see the line wherever I release the mouse button, and wherever the line is, it gives you a preview of how wide the column will be. When you release the mouse button, that's how wide the column is. Now that's a bit too wide. I've got a lot of space here, and town as well is pretty narrow, and I've got a whole bunch of space here which I really don't need. So what I can do it 2 ways. I can again hover my mouse button or hover my mouse pointer over the dividing line between the town and the address column, and again it must look like this double-headed arrow before I can do this. And if I double left click, the column will snap back, and it will be as wide enough as it needs to be to accommodate the widest thing in the column. So that's another useful way of doing it. The second way of doing that is to right click. I've just made it wide again. I've manually dragged it out, and I can right click on the column header, go to Field Width, and I can click on Best Fit, and again that will narrow it down to be as wide as it needs to be to accommodate the widest thing in it, which is this town here, Great Britain. Let's try the same for occupied. Actually, occupied is a bad example, and so is bedrooms. You might be looking at occupied and bedrooms and you might be thinking, well, what's all this space here? all the way down. I mean, it surely seems like we could save some space here, but don't forget the column header, occupied, and bedrooms. They're part of the column as well. So occupied is the widest thing in that column, and that's why when I double left click or when I right click, go to field width and go to best fit, that's it. That is the best fit for that column. And similarly with bedrooms, if I click on best fit, that's the best fit for that column. So that's all there is to it. I'll do another one. Just right click on, for instance, the type column, go to field width. This time I'll type in 12, and as you can see, that's far too narrow. So I can either click and drag it out, or I can double left click to make it as wide enough as it needs to be to accommodate the widest thing in the column, which looks like semi-detached house. So that's all there is to changing column widths in Access. Pretty easy. The next piece of editing we're going to look at is looking for specific text within a table. Access can search a table for specific information based on something that you type in using the find facility. We saw how to use search and replace, and how to use find as well in Microsoft Word and Access. And we can do the same, or sorry, in Excel. We can do the same in Access. So once the text has been specified, Access will search the table for whatever you've typed in. And we can restrict the search to a single field only, or we can move it out to the entire table. So let's look at how that works. I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm going to open up my Staff 1 database. And we saw we've already used this database in a previous video. We have two Access tables in here, two objects, which are tables, courses and staff. I'm going to open up the staff table, and I'm going to click in the first name field of the first record. Okay. And I'm going to click on the Home tab. You can see that there is a Find group. I'm going to click on the big magnifying glass, which is the Find button. And you can also use Control and F for your keyboard. It's the same keyboard shortcut, in fact, from Word and Excel as well. I'll just click on the Find button, and I'll get the Find and Replace dialog box. And what I'm interested in doing, I'm going to type in something here. I'm interested in looking for the first name, Anthony. So I'm going to type in Anthony. And have a look at the settings here. I'm going to leave these settings set as they are. I'm going to look in the current field. I'm going to leave match whole field, and I'm going to look for search all. And I'm going to click find next. And you can see that Access has jumped down to the 6th record, and it's found exactly what I've typed in. It's found the text Anthony. Let's click on find next. And it's jumped onto record 10. It's found another Anthony, Anthony Chamberlain. If I click on find next again, that's it. Microsoft Access finished searching the records. The search item was not found. Now that means that it looked from record 10, it looked down in the rest of the table. There were only 2 records, and it didn't find Anthony down here or down here, obviously. So let's left click OK. All right. Let's go to the date of employment. I'm going to use my double left click trick to widen the column out, and I'm going to click anywhere in the date of employment field on the very first record. And the reason you click on the first record is because you want to search from the first record. Now if you wanted to search from the 10th or 50th record on, you'd click in that one. But I want to search the entire column, so I'm going to click in the very first record in that column. And again, I'm going to go to find, and I'm going to look for a specific date of employment. I'm going to type in the 1st / the 12th / 1986. Now note the format that I've typed it in. I need to type it in the same format that the dates are put in. I'm going to click on find next, and it's jumped down to record 5. Ms. Kira Lee, and that's where it's found that date. Alright, so click on the close button, and that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all you need to know about using find. Now you may be wondering about case. If I go to find, I've gone back to the first name, and I'm going to look for the name Norma, and I've typed it in lowercase letters. Click on find, and you can see that it's still found Norma, even though they've input the data as Norma with a capital N. Similarly, if I type in Norma in all capital letters, sorry, let me go back to the first record and do that again. It's still going to find Norma. In fact, you could type it in any combination of uppercase and lowercase that you wanted to, and it's still going to find it. And the reason for that is that this find and replace facility is what we call case insensitive. Okay, it doesn't care what case that the letters are in. So that's how we use the find and replace tool to search for specific text within the same field or within the same column. In the next section, we're going to look at how to use wildcards. We'll explain what wildcards are and how they're so useful and how to use them. In this section, we're going to look at using what are known as wildcards when we're using the search facility. Now, I have to stress that, in fact, there's an information logo in the book which says that using the search command with wildcards isn't actually part of the requirement for the module. So you're not going to be asked any questions in the exam for using wildcards when you're using the search, the find and replace box, using that to search for text. So it's not part of the requirements. You might be wondering, well, then why do we need to look at it? We are going to use wildcards later on when we go to do queries. So that's why we need to use them. But you won't need to know about them when you're actually searching for text. But this is a good way of introducing wildcards so that we'll know about them when we actually go to start using queries. So let's have a look at what they are. A wildcard is basically a way of replacing either a letter or a group of letters when you're entering text that you're looking for. It's if you don't know exactly how something is going to be spelled. So for example, if I was looking for the text John Smith and I didn't know whether John spelled his name S-M-I-T-H or S-M-Y-T-H, I could look for both instances of the word in one search using a wildcard rather than doing two individual searches. So let's see it in action. I'm going to go to File and Open. And I'm looking for, on the desktop, in my Access ECDL data files folder, the Geography 1 database, which we've seen already, the one with the country and regions table. There's also a form there, but we'll ignore that. I'm going to open up the country table, and I can see that I have 47 records in there with, it looks like 8 fields, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fields, yes. So I'm going to go to the capital column or the capital field, and again I'm clicking in the first record or the first row because I want my search to start from there. And I'm going to click on the Find button on the Home tab, or you can hold down Control and F. And just like in the previous section, I need to type in the text that I'm looking for in the Find What box. I'm going to type in the following: T-O-K question mark O. So in other words, I'm looking for Tokyo, but I'm imagining that somebody may have input the information incorrectly. They may have spelled it as T-O-K-I-O instead of the way it's actually spelled, T-O-K-Y-O. And I'm going to click Find Next. And it's come all the way down to record 23 and it's found Tokyo. So that's how a wildcard works. So that's the question mark. There are 3 wildcards that we're going to look at. The question mark represents a single alphabetic character, just one character. The hash symbol, which we'll see in a second, represents a single numeric character, so a number. And then finally, the star represents any group of characters at all, right? Text or numbers. So let's see another example of this. I'm going to click in the currency field, and I'm going to click the Find button again. And this time I'm going to type in the following: D star or. And then I'm going to click on, just move this out of the way, Find Next. What that's going to do is it's going to search for all currencies beginning with the letter D and ending with an or. Because what the star button does is it represents any group of characters. So beginning with a D and ending with an or. And if I click on Find Next, which I've just done there, it's found dollar for the Australian dollar. If I click on Find Next again, Canada, North America, dollar. The dinar for Iraq, dinar for Libya, dollar, dinar for Kuwait, dollar, and that's it. That's the whole. As you can see, I was clicking on find next there. So that's what the star does. It represents any group of characters. So if I wanted to find a word that began with a specific letter and ended with a specific letter, that's what I do. I type in the first letter, star, which means any group of characters, and then the last letter, and then I click on find or find next. So that is essentially wildcards. Now I'm going to see if I can show you that the examples in the book are not particularly good. What I'm going to do is do another one here. I'm going to stay in the currency and I'm going to click on find again. And this time, instead of looking for D star or, I'm going to look for the following: E, and then 2 question marks, and then an O. So a question mark represents a single character. I'm looking for E something something O. So if I click on find, you should see that it's basically going to find euro, euro, euro. So the question marks, you have to put in each question mark for the specific letter, okay? This is not going to work, for instance, if I did the following. If I only had 1 question mark. Because there is no currency in that field that spells E something O. That would only work with the 2 question marks, okay? Like that. I could have also done the following. Go back to find and typed in E, and then remember the star represents any group of characters, and then O. And that will also find the euros. So just to reiterate, the 3 wildcards we need to know about are the question mark, which represents a single alphabetic character, the hash symbol, which represents a single numeric character, and finally the star sign, which represents any group of characters. So again, just to reiterate, the use of wildcards while using the search command, as we're doing here, isn't part of the requirement for this module. You won't be asked any questions on it, but when we go to look at queries, we will be using wildcards to construct our queries, and you will need to know about that. So this is a nice way of introducing wildcards. Let's look at one more example. I'm going to click on the region one, and I want to look basically for any regions that contain the word America. So how will I do it? Well, I click in the first row, again because I want my search to take place from the first row down. Click on find. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter the following in the find and replace dialog box. So clicked in the region column, I'm going to select make sure the current field in the looking box, and then in the find what box I'm going to type in America, but I'm going to change one of the settings down here. Instead of matching the whole field, which means that it's going to look for exactly what you've typed in here verbatim here, if I click on find next, it says the search item was not found, but I can see America is clearly listed here, North America, Central America. But don't forget, exactly what you type in here when it's set to whole field means it's only going to look for the word America here. It's not going to look for America as part of that field. So what I need to do there is, instead of match whole field, I need to select from the drop down arrow here, I need to select any part of field and then find next. And now I can see where America is mentioned in the region: South America, Central America, North America, and so on and so forth. Let's try another one of those. Let's go to the population field. Let's, again, first record, Control and F this time, just to mix it up to get my find and replace dialog box back. And what I want to do is I want to find which countries in this table have a population of between 4 and 5 million. So how would I do that? Well, here's what I do. In the find what box, I'm going to type in 4 and then dot and then the hash symbol. And I'm going to change my match back to whole field. All right, and I'm going to click next. And that's going to look for any population between 4 and 4.9, in fact, or 5, which 4.9 would be the last one, 4.1, 4.5, and so on and so forth. So remember the hash symbol, remember the 3 wildcards that we talked about, the hash symbol represents a single numeric character. So I had to type in 4 point, and then the hash symbol here means it's going to look for 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and so on and so forth, all the way up to 4.9. So it's going to find everything between 4 and 5 million, but not including 5 million. It's going to go all the way up to 4.9. So hopefully that has made sense. Those are the only 3 wildcards that we need to know about. As I say, you won't be asked this question in terms of using it in the search facility, but it's a good way of introducing them, because you will need to know about wildcards when we go to start looking at queries. And queries are much more powerful anyway when it comes to extracting information from a database. What we're doing here with searching for text in an individual table is all well and good, but it's not really what you do when you actually want to extract information, specific information from the database. So that's all there is to using wildcards when searching. In the next section, we're going to look at editing data within a table. In this section, we look at editing data in a table. It's very, very easy to do. We can modify records in a table just by clicking on the appropriate record, the appropriate cell which has a record in it, and then just use our normal key presses that we do, like backspacing and deleting and so on and so forth. So just a couple of quick examples. The country table is still open, as you can see, in the geography databases from the last section that we were looking at. And I'm going to find a record for, let's see, I'm going to find the record for Austria. So I'm going to look in country, and there's a record for Austria. Because these are sorted, we'll be looking at those in due course as well, how to sort. These are sorted alphabetically, so Austria is here in record 4. And I'm going to click once on the population field over here. Now, when you left click on the edge of a cell, the entire cell is selected. But if you left click in the middle of the cell, you'll see that the cursor will start to blink. And you can actually start to edit it individually. You can edit each individual character. In this case, what I want to do is I want to type in another number to the right of the decimal point. I don't want it to be 7.6. I want it to be 7.7. So I could select the entire cell like this. You can click on the edge of the cell to select the entire cell and type in 7.7. Sorry. And while you're editing any record, you can see this little pencil or pen icon appears in the row selector to indicate that this row is being, or this row and record is being edited or is being changed or updated. So you'll see that whenever you're typing in anything into a cell in an existing row. So that's one way of doing it. What I could also do is I could left click in front of the 6, press my delete key, because don't forget from our word days, delete will delete to the right of the cursor, and type in 7. Or I could left click at the end of the 7. You have to be pretty specific with the mouse there, and press backspace and then type in what is it, 7.7, yeah, 7.6, whatever I was changing it to. So that's all there is to it, really. We can select the entire cell, and we could type, and the contents of that cell would immediately be overwritten, so there'd be no need to delete anything at all. Or if you want to edit individual letters, you would click in the middle of the cell. So for example, let's imagine I had misspelled Vienna, which I've done here. I spelled it with only one N. Rather than clicking on the cell like this and having to type in the whole word again, I know it's only a short word, but just to give you an example. Instead, what I can do is I can left click right where I need to within the cell and just type in the additional letter. So that's all there is to it. Just a note on that, when you're editing something, so for instance, I've typed in Vienna and I want to change it again. You might be thinking, do I need to save changes? No. The minute you click off the row onto any other row, the row or record that you're working on is automatically saved, or what we say is committed to the database. So you don't need to save it in the traditional sense like that you would in Word. The second you've made your change, so I'm making a change here, and the second I click on any other row, the row that I'm working on or editing is committed or saved to the database. So there's no saving. You don't need to go up here or hold down Control and S. That's all there is to editing data. Pretty easy. In the next section, we're going to look at the undo facility, which works a little bit different, or a little bit differently to how it works in Word and Excel and PowerPoint. Just a couple of things that we have to watch out for. So we'll look at that in the next section of the video. In this section of the video, we're going to look at the undo facility in Access. Just like Word and PowerPoint and Excel and other programs in the Microsoft Office suite, we can undo previous operations that we do in Access. So it is possible to undo changes that you make to a record by selecting the undo button. However, there are a couple of minor changes or differences with regard to how undo works in Access. While it is possible to undo something that you do to a record, it will only work for a record that is still currently selected, in other words, a row or a record that you're still working on, or if you've gone on to a new row and no further changes have been made. Now, I'll give you an example now with regard to exactly what I'm talking about, and you can see how this works. I've got the Geography 1 database open, and I've got the country table open, and I'm going to go into the first field of the first record, or the first row, which is the Afghanistan record, and I'm just going to press tab to go on to the next column or the next field. And you can see that Asia is selected, so I'm going to type in Europe, which obviously is wrong for the region for Afghanistan. And I'm also going to tab again, and I'm going to overtype Kabul, the capital, with Paris. Press enter or tab and go on to the next field. Now, I won't make any of the changes. The undo button is in the same place that it is in other Microsoft Office applications. It's up in the quick access toolbar. You can also hold down Control and Z, or Z if you prefer, which will also undo your previous action. So I'm going to left click once on undo, and you can see that both of the changes have been undone. It's not like Word where you go back one at a time. Both of those changes with regard to that record are regarded as one operation, one undo operation. So Kabul has now been reinstated instead of Paris, and the region for Asia has now been reinstated instead of Europe. So I'm going to repeat steps 1 and 2. I'm going to type in Europe again for the region, and for the capital I'm going to type in Paris. And now I'm going to click the capital field of Denmark. I'm just going to go down to the Denmark row. That's the record I'm now on. Don't forget, whenever you click onto another record after you've made changes to the record that you're on, the record that you were on, that you were making changes in, is automatically saved or committed to the database. So the second I click down onto the Denmark row here, the Afghanistan row or record was committed or saved to the database. Alright? Now, that doesn't mean that I can't undo what I just did, because as I said at the very start of this section, we can undo as long as no further changes have been made if we're on a new row. So I still have access to undo. If I click undo, you can see that Asia and Kabul have now been reinstated. Okay, so however, if I do the following, again I'm going to redo those, and if I go down to Denmark, and if I change the population in Denmark to 5.2, now if I undo, I can undo the previous change that I made to Denmark, but notice that I cannot go back and make any further changes whatsoever. I can't go back to the Afghanistan row or record and change what I did there. I would have to manually type in, which I will do now. I would have to manually type in the actual the proper details. I can't undo it. So those are the rules for using undo. You can only undo something on a record that you're still currently working on, or that is still currently selected, or if you go on to a new record, you can still go back and undo what you did on the previous record as long as you haven't done anything on this record. But the second you do anything on this record, then anything that you did in the previous record, that's no longer available via the undo. So that's what all there is to undo. You can also use Control and Z as well. We also have a redo button which undoes the undo, if you like. It redoes what you just did, and that works exactly the same as it does in Word. So do be careful about that when you're working in tables and when you're working with the undo facility. It can get you out of trouble, but only up to a certain point. In the next section we're going to look at just some very quick keyboard shortcuts for further editing. We look at some keyboard shortcuts for further editing in this section, very brief. We already know a lot of these keyboard shortcuts, in fact, from working in Word and Excel, and some of them work exactly the same way in Access. To highlight the examples, I'm going to open the Staff 1 database, which has our two tables, courses and staff, and I'll open up both of them. by double left clicking on each one. In the courses table, if you look down at the very last row, it says Creative Accounting for Beginners. I'm going to pretend that I want to rename that Computer Accounting for Beginners. So it should simply be a question of left clicking at the end of the word creative, deleting the word creative, and typing in Computer Accounting for Beginners. That's all there is to it. Okay, now there were multiple ways I could have done that, but that's probably the most straightforward way, and the way that most of you are probably familiar with. If we look at the fourth record, which says Intro to Access, actually it's not the fourth record now, it's the second record because of the sorting here. But we want that to read Introduction to Access. So how would I change it? Well, I just left click at the very end of the word intro to get the cursor blinking there, and I type in the rest of the word introduction. That's all we do. And of course, the minute we click off that row, don't forget, whenever you click off a row or a record, the previous record that you were working on is automatically saved or changed. We're going to pretend there's an error in the date of the Virus Writers Workshop. So if we look at the Virus Writers Workshop, it shouldn't be taking place on the 25th of the 2nd. It should be taking place on the 25th of the 3rd. So again, left click after the 2, press backspace, and type in number 3, and that's all there is to it. So we're going to close the database. I'm going to continue on with this section. I'm not going to end this section of the video here because it's kind of tied in with what we're going to go on to now. Just some other keyboard shortcuts as well while I'm here. As you should hopefully remember from when we worked in Microsoft Word, probably more so, using your arrow key will move forward a character at a time. So I'm using my right arrow key here to move forward a character at a time, left arrow key to move backwards a character at a time. If I wanted to type in Virus Writers Workshop, if I wanted to change the word writers or delete the word writers, I have a number of different options. I can double left click on the word writers to get rid of it, or when your cursor is beginning at blinking at the beginning of a word, you have a couple of options for how to advance and select one word at a time. Remember from Word, when we held down Shift, Control and the arrow key, that will advance our cursor on one word at a time. And if I go to the end of it, I can hold down Control, Shift, and that will go backwards a word at a time. The key, the sequence of the keys is important actually. So like that. Okay, so depending on which way you want to go in. So Shift, Control, and forwards and backwards like that. We'll jump the cursor forwards and we'll select each word at a time. If you just want to advance each word at a time, don't hold down Shift, just hold down Control and your arrow key like this to move backwards and forwards one at a time. If you press the Home key, that will take you to the very beginning of whatever content is in your cell. And if you press the End key, obviously you're going to go back to the very, very end. All right. Another shortcut as well, Control and Backspace, if you wanted to delete an entire word very quickly without holding Shift, Control and the arrow to select it and then deleting it using the backspace key, or without double left clicking on it like this, what you can do is you can hold down Control and Backspace. And when your cursor is at the end of the word, what that will do is it will automatically delete the whole word. Similarly, Control and Delete will delete to the right of the cursor, but will delete an entire word that's to the right of the cursor. Okay, so those are just a couple of useful keyboard shortcuts. I've got the captions for those coming up in the video, as you can see. All right, finally, we're going to look at adding and deleting records, and we're going to look at editing shortcuts. So I'm going to kind of bundle those in with what we're doing right now. So I've got the staff table open, as you can see, and I'm going to make sure that the Home tab is displayed, which it is. And what I want to do is I want to select or create a new record. Now I can do that by going down here and clicking on the next available row. But there is also, up in the Records group in the Home tab, there is a New button as well. And what that will do is it will do pretty much the same thing. It will bring you down onto the new row. Okay, same thing, different way of doing it. And we're going to create a record by typing in the following information. So if you want to follow along here with me on this. Actually, you know what? We're going to do it in the staff table instead. We'll do it in the staff table because there's just more information for us to work with here. So I'm in the staff table. I'm just going to widen out my first column. I'm going to left click on the new row, or you could have gone to new up here. And I'm going to type in the following information. 521 for an employee number, Miss for the title, Singh. Now I'm taking this information from the book. Miss Geeta Singh. She is a sales manager. Her date of employment is the 21st of the 6th, 1999. We're going to type in the following employee or NI number, sorry, WF 56789 and finally G. For her salary, we're going to give her a salary of 30,000. And finally, her date of birth is the 22nd of the 7th, 1965. Okay. Went on to a new row. Geeta Singh's record is automatically saved. Now we want to delete it. So we've seen this working when we were doing our table relationships, when we were deleting records. But just sort of go over it again. Right click on the record selector, which is these squares here, okay? We'd have called them row selectors in Excel and they would have been numbered. For here, we're just gonna, we call them record selectors. So if we right click on that, and if we select delete record, you'll always get a dialog box that says you're about to delete one record, and if you click yes, you won't be able to undo this delete operation. That's important. Remember, we spoke about deleting, or rather undoing there in the previous section, or 2 sections ago. There are only certain things we can undo in Access. Deleting records is not one of them. We cannot undo a deletion of a record. So if you delete a record, you have to be sure that you want to delete it, because you can't get it back. You'll have to put in the details yourself. I'm going to say yes, I am sure, and that's it. The record is gone. So that's all we need to do. We need to right click and we need to select delete record, and then if we're sure that we want to proceed, we click on the yes button. If you click on no, obviously nothing will happen. So that's all there is to adding and deleting records. You have a number of different ways of adding records. The 2 ways that we looked at was simply to click on the last row, which will always be down here. This blank row down here is a new record, a new row in which you can save your information. You can also, if you want to, if you're on another row, the new option up here in records on the home tab in the records group will also be available. That will always bring you down to the new blank row as well. Or if you want to, you can click down here at the very, very bottom as well, with the record controls down here. This will bring you down to a new blank record as well. So 3 different ways of doing the same thing. So that's all there is to that. So let's see how we're doing. Editing shortcuts. Yeah, I'm going to put the last section in here as well. Editing shortcuts. A couple of very useful pieces of, or rather keyboard shortcuts as well for you for this. We're still going to work in the staff table. I'm going to add the following new employee. Geeta Singh is gone, but I'm going to add the following new employee. So 802, Mr. Miles Peter. He is a, let's just call him an accountant. Okay. Now I'm going to use the date of employment. I'm going to pretend that he was employed on exactly the same day as Ellen Ripley. Without needing to type in, there are a couple of ways you could do it. You could right click on Ellen's date of employment, you could copy it, and then you could go down here and then you could paste it. You could do that, but even quicker is the following. You may remember this from Excel as well. If you hold down Control and press the @ key, so Control and the @ key, what that will do is it will always copy whatever is in the field in the row directly above it. Okay, let's try the same for salary. Let's imagine that he's going to have the same salary as Ellen. So if we hold down Control and the @ key, again, the exact same thing is copied from above. And let's try the same for the date of birth. Control and @ key. So that can be useful sometimes if you're typing in many records and maybe the same person in the record above has the same information that you want to put into that field that you're now working on. Just Control and the @ key will do that for you. So that's a very useful keyboard shortcut for copying whatever is in the row above you. If you wanted to put in a date of employment as today, rather than typing in, trying to figure, well, what date is today, and you have to type it in, you can also do the following. You can simply hold down Control and the semicolon key. You may remember that from Excel as well. What that will do is it will always automatically insert whatever today's date is. As you can see today, I'm doing this on Sunday the 29th. So Control and the semicolon key will always put in today's date in a field. Obviously you want to be putting into a field, you're not going to be putting that into the position field or the first name field. It would be going into a date column. It wouldn't make any sense to put it in any other column, even though you could if you wanted to. But there might be problems obviously if the data type was not right. So obviously it's going into a date of employment data type field. So that's all there is to that. That's the editing shortcuts, and that is now the end of the editing section. You will find the links to the revision exercises. There are 3 revision exercises for this chapter, so work through them in your own time. As always, if you have any questions, let me know. Just drop me a line and I'll try and get back to you as quickly as I can. In the next video we're going to look at sorting and filtering. It's going to be a very, very short chapter. We're only going to look at 2 things: sorting records and using filters. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and let me know if you have any questions.